And I'd like us all to begin by getting comfortable in our chairs or recliners or, or wherever we are. If you could just relax your body and take a couple of deep breaths in and out. And know that you are welcomed to this circle. If it's your first time or if you're a repeat customer. Know that you are welcome to this circle if you are completely well of body and mind, or if you have aches and pains or any disturbances. Know that you're welcome to this circle, whatever background and whatever questions or doubts that you bring today. Know that you're welcome to this circle if your day is busy or open, or if you're worried about the future, or if you have feelings of contentment today. You are welcome to this circle. Amen. So I'm going to ask Alex if he would introduce himself a little bit. Well, maybe, sorry, Alex, let me first say, why are we on this topic? You may remember in the fall of 2019, Spiritual Enrichment had a film called On the Brink. And it was, the producer was Jeff Shulman, the nephew of the Joan Kuzel. And Jeff is on the faculty of the University of Washington Business School, the Foster School of Business. The film was about the Central District in Seattle, a historic African-American community that experienced what we might call gentrification, sort of bit by bit. Many of the longtime residents and all the culture that goes with a neighborhood started to be eroded. But eventually the community gathered together, came together and said, let's do what we can do to work with this development of our neighborhood so that we can preserve our heritage, our uniqueness as a community. So that's what the film was about. And somebody, it was probably my good friend Paul there, said, don't we have something somewhat akin to that in the Chicago area with the coming of the Obama Presidential Center? And so we decided to have a program or two on this very topic. And that's why we're gathered today and next week. Today's presenter is Alex Goldenberg, and I'll ask him to introduce himself in a moment. And then next week's presenter is Guion Foreman, the Executive Director of Emerald South Economic Development Cooperative. I'm going to ask you to mute yourselves during Alex's presentation so that we can minimize any disturbances. Alex, introduce yourself and tell us about your perspective.
Sure. So my name is Alex Goldenberg. Again, I'm grateful to be with you all this morning. Hope that you and your families are doing well considering everything. I'm the director of STOP, which stands for Southside Together Organizing for Power. We're based in Woodlawn and surrounding neighborhoods. Our office is right in the heart of Woodlawn on 61st and St. Lawrence. I've been working with the organization for the better part of 15 years. I started when I was a student at the University of Chicago and got involved in some efforts to try to stop the university from purchasing and demolishing a subsidized housing complex just south of the university. And that campaign kind of snowballed into the community organization that STOP became. And so it started, as a partnership with a small core of some student activists and some tenants, and the tenants really started to build out the tenant organizing aspect of the work. And it grew into a community organization that works on not only affordable housing issues, but also mental health. We've been leading the fight to get the city of Chicago to reopen the public mental health clinics. And we have a youth program whose I think most notable work was the campaign to reopen the trauma center at the University of Chicago, which we won a couple of years ago. So did you want me to just get right into it? Yeah, okay.
Yes, go ahead, Alex. And then Alex will be reserving some time at the end for conversation. Yeah, go ahead, Alex.
Okay. And I'm going to watch the time. I think I'll probably just go for 15 to 20 minutes, and I'd rather have more discussion. And I could talk about this stuff forever because I've been living and breathing it for so long. So yeah, definitely excited to talk more with you all. So okay. I'm going to start with just a little bit of kind of history, because I think that that's important. And some of you probably have even been to 63rd Street back in the day, and maybe even, I got to experience what Woodlawn was. So I just wanted to kind of put this picture up for us to look at together for a little bit, because, when I started doing work in the neighborhood, it was 2004, and the elders that kind of welcomed me and the other folks that I was working within really would constantly reference, what the neighborhood was. It was a working class neighborhood along 63rd. There were storefronts that lined the entire commercial corridor. It was vibrant. There was a lot of culture. There was a lot of characters and color, and that history, I think, is really what people built culture around and through, identities, made meaning of their lives, right? And so that's why I think it's so important to start there, because when African Americans started moving into the neighborhood in around the 40s and 50s, really, is when it kind of took on this working class African American identity. A lot of the economy was based on folks working in manufacturing and the steel mills, right? And that's kind of what allowed for this flourishing, right? And of course, we know the history of what happened, as we deregulated, as those jobs went overseas, and this neighborhood, and many neighborhoods around the country started to really suffer. And some folks held on, right? And those elders that kind of welcomed me in, that I mentioned, are some of those people who kind of held on and and continued to make the best of things as they declined. A lot of harm was done through that process, which I think is important to understand as well. Just north of 2 or 3 blocks north of this vibrant business corridor was the University of Chicago, right? One of the wealthiest, most important institutions in the world. And they absolutely had a role throughout the history. And during this decline, an important role in actually perpetuating and escalating harm that was being done. I don't know that there's concrete evidence, but a lot of rumors, and it appears to align up with their interests. The university is widely rumored to have paid people to burn down businesses for the sake of collecting insurance as a way to clear them from the area, right? And so there was this at least oral history of the university actually burning down the neighborhood, right? And whether or not they had the direct hand in that or not, I think is irrelevant. I think the point is that gets at the perception of them in the neighborhood, the role that they had, right? They have a very well documented history of urban renewal, right? There's a great book called The Making of the Second Ghetto that maybe some of you have read, by Arnold Hirsch. Has a whole chapter really kind of explaining the details of how the university shaped urban policy, developed the policy of urban renewal to displace working Black families from Hyde Park and also Woodlawn. But despite this effort to push out, the working Black families from this neighborhoods around the university, and I think again that lines up with their interest because, the university, it's in the university's interest to have a higher income neighborhood that's, quote, safer, in order to market their product, which is, education to wealthy elites, right? And and I can attest as a student, when I got there, the first thing they told us was, don't go south of 61st, don't go west of Cottage Grove. There was a conscious effort to build a bubble from which their campus community ought to flourish, right? And so, so throughout the history of them, their role in urban policy and how they interact with the neighborhood was one of efforts to displace and to bring in higher income people, right? And I think that again is laid out very clearly in Hirsch's work and bears out in what what we see today. And so I bring all that up to say, once we get into the conversation about the Obama Center development and what's to come, it's important to understand the harms that were done, and when we think about what needs to be done looking forward, there's a lot of repair that needs to happen, right? And who is responsible for that repair? And that's why it's important, I think, to understand that. So, one other important point is that, I don't want to paint a picture of folks just getting beat down either, because there's also a vibrant history of organizing in the neighborhood, right? The TWO, the Woodlawn organization, in its heyday in the early 60s, won a hugely historic battle against the university, actually, to force them to hold the line and not expand south of 61st. In exchange, the university would go up to 61st, would invest in some affordable housing, and there was some kind of peace between the activists and organizers of the community and the university. Interestingly, that the deal to get that affordable housing development back in the early 60s, that was the very complex that I got involved in work around, because over 40 years later, the university was trying to push that out. That was the actual complex that the university was trying to purchase and demolish, which was called the Grove Park Plaza complex. So there's a long history of that organizing. There's block club organizing for healthcare, civil rights. So when I kind of came into the neighborhood, I was stepping into work, on the shoulders of a lot of that work as well, that I think is important to note. With the housing bubble of the early 2000s, started to really bring some change to Woodlawn. Before that, I think there was much more focus on the development community, on Hyde Park, and Woodlawn was kind of in this state of decline, since the 80s, when things really accelerated, and then since then it was kind of just in this steady state, and things started to change in the early 2000s. You saw the condo boom. Some of our stop's early work was trying to stop landlords from converting buildings to condos and pushing out folks that were paying affordable rent so that they could convert them to condos. And that trend, the bubble burst and things kind of slowed a little bit, but the effort to profit in that way, it became this profitable place for the real estate interests, I think, for the development community. From that point, it hasn't shifted from view. And so, in that context, during, as we were experiencing the recovery, the announcement of the Obama Center, once again reignited kind of that attention, energy, and interest. And so we saw And I'm going to shift my screen share here to a slide. I'll start here. This is from a report that UIC did. Janet Smith from the Department of Urban Planning there in collaboration with us. And so this is kind of the area, you know, when they announced the Obama Center was coming to Jackson Park, this is kind of the area that we felt, you know, would be impacted potentially, this 2-mile radius around it. 2 miles a little longer, you know, than some would say, but we wanted to make sure that, you know, that we were capturing, you know, all the real estate impacts that this would have. What I wanted to pull up was this slide that just kind of gave here it is, a sense of how the median home values trended, right? Not sure if I'm like zoomed right for folks to see, but hopefully you can see this well. So you see back in you know, the housing bubble of 2004, right? It kind of trended with Chicago, right? The way the housing values rose, and Woodlawn is 60637, a little bit of 60615. But you can see that the blue and orange is what we're talking about. And what you see things really kind of change is in 2016-17, Chicago has sort of a, you know, it's sloping up, but it's not as aggressive an upward slope. But you see this trend line become very dramatic in 26 and 2017. And that's really the impact of this Obama Center announcement, right? This is when Redfin put out a report saying that Woodlawn was the 3rd hottest real estate market in the country, right? So this is all on the back of the Obama Center announcement. So we kind of, you know, we were feeling that this was likely to happen since we heard the announcement. I think a lot of us immediately thought of the idea of a community benefits agreement because it is one of the kind of tools in the toolbox that, you know, has gotten a lot of attention nationally when it comes to ways that communities can impact mega developments. And so, you know, immediately when this announcement came, a lot of us already started thinking about that, you know, that same day. At the time, we were involved in work around the trauma center still. We haven't quite gotten the commitment from the university yet. And so with the announcement of the Obama Center and the fact that the university was directly involved in courting the Obama Center to, you know, to the neighborhood around the university, to us, it became useful as a tactic to say, you know, how can the university be involved in hosting the first Black president's library and legacy when they're systematically denying Black life by not opening their doors to folks who are dying just down the street from them, right? Of gunshot wounds and other trauma. And that message really stuck. And I think was arguably one of the most impactful of all of our tactics, you know, in that campaign. And definitely want to thank Pastor Knox and their church also kind of played a role in that campaign and put pressure to help us ultimately win that. And I think it was kind of the culmination of everything from the faith community, from regular residents and community members, students, and then this national push that we really got around, you know, the university started to, everything they did around the Obama Center started to get associated with the trauma center. And so I think that is in part what led to them saying, you know, we got to put this out, this liability, right? And so once that commitment was won, it opened up some capacity for us to come back to this idea of, you know, what would a CBA, a community benefits agreement, look like? What can we do to make sure that when this development comes, the folks that live in this area, one, you know, don't get pushed out, that their history, the culture that they've built in their communities is invested in and grows and thrives, right? As opposed to being crushed and pushed away. And so housing was obviously an important piece of that, making sure that there continued to be affordable housing. But we've also been paying attention to and looking at employment opportunities as really important, economic development opportunities, the impact of the center on education, the impact of the center on sustainability in terms of there being in a park. Those are kind of some of the major issues, transportation as well. So initially we created a community benefits agreement that we wanted to be signed with the Obama Center, with the University of Chicago, and with the city of Chicago that would put in place some policies to ensure that folks got to stay, that folks got to benefit, along those lines that I was talking about, in housing, education, economic development. We looked at those three institutions because they are the three major power players that will decide the fate of the community, right? The University of Chicago, since the announcement of the Obama Center, announced that they were building a new dorm, a new conference center, and a new luxury hotel just blocks away from the university, from the Obama Center. So clearly the development of the center had an important impact on their decision making and their potential to profit, right? And so we felt that they had a responsibility, given the way they were profiting now in the current moment and the impact that their development was having on housing prices and the surrounding neighborhood, as well as the history, which I referenced earlier, right? And the actual need for them to still repair a lot of the harm that they have done over the years and are continuing to do to this day, by engaging in those development practices without offsetting and accounting for the way that they're destabilizing the community. So the University of Chicago, the city of Chicago, obviously has a lot to say about housing policy. And so they were one that we needed to include. And the Obama Center, because obviously they're building the center itself. Early in the campaign, we were taking these demands to all three of them. And in taking them to the Obama Center, had a big public meeting. That they were holding a big public meeting, the Obama Center, about what they were doing. And we came prepared to ask our question about, would they be willing to support a CBA? And at one of those meetings, we were notified that we would get a chance to ask the, leadership from the Obama Center. And so we had a speaker ready, and to our surprise, President Obama himself actually Skyped into the meeting and was there on the screen, and we got to ask him directly. It didn't go as we had hoped. Unfortunately, he said he would not be willing to sign a CBA, and he laid out a couple of reasons. He said, if I sign an agreement with your coalition, there will be 20 other people asking for agreements, 20 other groups asking for agreements. He said because they're a nonprofit entity, it doesn't make as much sense to do a CBA. And lastly, he said, their whole goal is to do good, and they have good intentions, and so it wouldn't be necessary. And so we kind of expected a no. We always get a no before we get a yes in our line of work, at least. But at least for a lot of us, when President Obama came on the screen, it was like you could hear this collective joyful inhaling of air and holding of breath. And of course, we all have that, like the leaders of our coalition all have the day one Obama senator, even Obama, state rep t-shirts are, diehard supporters as well. But still, felt that they have a responsibility here. But the way his presence impacts the room and so on, we knew right away that it would be very hard to run a campaign where they are technically the target, right? Where the President Obama is technically the target. And so in debriefing that meeting, decided that we ought to shift our energy and really focus on the responsibility of the city and the university, because, we understood politically, we need to get sympathy of a broad range of people if we're going to actually move a significant policy that has very stiff opposition, right? The developers are looking at that 2-mile radius and they're seeing dollar signs. They're foaming at the mouth, right? As we already saw housing prices, escalating so rapidly. So we shifted at that point towards the idea of a city ordinance that would include a lot of the policies that we were calling for, as well as continuing to push for the university to sign the CBA. It was around this time elections were coming, municipal elections. And so the opportunity to move something around the city really kind of rose to the foreground as where we should focus our energy. And as the Obama Center and others started to make some announcement around hiring that they were committing to and other things that, were actually pretty decent commitments, we realized that housing really was the kind of issue that was left with the least to say by any policymaker, right? And we strongly feel that without an aggressive affordable housing intervention, what we're going to see is displacement and people moved out, and we were already seeing and have already seen. So we kind of zeroed in on a CBA housing ordinance that would require some strong affordability protections. And the fight became around that. And actually, the person who asked Obama that question in that meeting with us ended up running for alderwoman, and she won, Alderwoman Jeanette Taylor. And she ran on a platform of pushing for a CBA. That was a game changer in terms of moving the city to actually address this. Her first or second city council meeting, she introduced the ordinance, and the mayor, had to respond. And so there was a lot of back and forth, a lot of negotiations, a lot of actions that we had to do along the way, a lot of protesting, petitioning, etc. And ultimately, we were able to get an agreement in the summer of last year. One of the big pieces that we were fighting over, you could say, was the vacant land. So this slide kind of shows everything that has a color is vacant land. So this red dot is where the Obama Center will be. This is kind of that 2-mile radius, and all this color is vacant land, right? Which is part of that legacy of disinvestment that I talked about, but also on the flip side, an opportunity, right? If you put the Obama Center in Lincoln Park, it's really hard to get a lot of affordable housing built there because it's all built out, right? Whereas here, there's an opportunity. So the blue ones are actually publicly owned. So you see the city of Chicago itself has a lot to say about the future of what happens in this community. So we argued that all of this land ought to be set aside for affordable housing. We ultimately compromised with a fourth of it. And so we ended up getting 25% of it to be set aside. That comes out to 52 lots. And it's real affordability. It's for folks making 50% and 30% of the area median income. So they're set aside for folks at those income levels. We've seen a lot of affordable housing policies that target people at much higher incomes, 60%, 80% AMI, right? That doesn't actually help the folks that live there. Even 30% of area median income is higher than a lot of folks make in the community. Right now, Woodlawn's median income is around $22,000 a year. 30% area median income is higher than that. It's a little higher than that. But our point was, if we're actually serious about preserving the culture, the history, the working class identity of the community, then there has to be housing options for folks at those income levels. And these 52 lots will go a long way towards that. There's several other programs in the ordinance. There's a grant program for working class homeowners. There's money for working class people to access home ownership. There's a rehab program that would require affordability if folks access the rehab program. And there's one other piece. Oh, and there's a right of first refusal where, if a landlord decides to sell, he has to give tenants the first right to buy. A lot of these don't have financing behind them, so they're useful tools, but there's a lot more work to do to actually reap the benefits of this housing policy that was won. It is, we think, the most aggressive affordable housing policy in recent memory that's been won in the city of Chicago. We think it's really important, but it's a down payment on what needs to happen, not the end, right? And so that's where, there's no financing. Where are we going to finance this? That's where we start to look to folks like the University of Chicago just north, right? Which has a tremendous amount of resources that they could be investing in the development of some of this affordable housing. We're also hopeful that the Biden administration has committed to drastically increase investment in affordable housing creation at levels not seen since the 60s. So, if that comes through, we're very hopeful that could have an impact. We're also, allies of work to get rent control in Chicago, which is another, really important policy to keep people. This UIC study estimates there's around 10,000 people who are at risk of being pushed out of the neighborhood. We feel that this policy that we put in place could have an impact on maybe 1,500 to 2,000 people. That still leaves a lot of folks vulnerable, right? And that's where I'm talking about, there's still a lot more work to do. I think a lot of folks are going to feel like, well, we passed this policy, we did this, we can check that box off, right? Now let's go. and so for us, I think it's important, again, to talk about this as a down payment, as the beginning, and say, hey, we got to track what's happening here. We got to look at displacement. We got to look at how incomes are changing in the neighborhood, and we have to make sure that this stuff gets followed through on. And there's work to do. There's folks that are gonna have to, again, to pitch in to make that happen. And so, that's where holding the university to account for this becomes really important. The federal government, and even going back and having conversation with the Obama Center as well. So yeah, I mean, I think folks have tried to portray us as against the Obama Center. Our coalition is not. It's not just STOP. I should have mentioned this at the front end, but it's also the Kenwood Oakland Community Organization, which is the oldest Black community organization in Chicago, community organizing organization. It's made up of the Black Youth Project 100, a youth organization. There's a student ally group called U Chicago Against Displacement. There's a group called Poor Peoples Incorporated. There's a local school council from the South Shore community that recently got involved. And actually a group that Pastor Knox probably knows, Asada's Daughters in Washington Park, who recently got involved. And so it's a coalition that's growing, that continues to see a need to follow through on these commitments. A lot of this land on 63rd is being looked at as a place to site a new business corridor, right? And so that's going to be an investment in economic development that we welcome, right? But will it be economic development targeting the working people and history of the community? Or will it be targeting outside higher income folks, right? And so, there will be a question about, you want amenities, high quality amenities. Of course, everybody wants that. But there are high quality amenities that working class people can access. And it's important to keep that in mind and keep those voices at the forefront in these planning decisions. And that's kind of the work of our coalition, is to ensure that that happens. Yeah, I'm trying to think what else you might hear from Guion, so I can kind of prepare folks to ask some critical questions. Because again, I think that the work that they're doing, it doesn't have to be bad necessarily, but it very quickly can become that way, right? Because there's a lot of money to be made from luxury, high-end real estate investment, right? And so as they think about bringing real estate investment to the neighborhood, are they prioritizing affordable housing and working families? And that's a question, right? With the business development, what are they doing to ensure that low-income and working families are at the forefront of planning decisions that get made, right, around the business development? Just the other day on the radio, he talked about wanting to make sure that the folks who make the cups that are going to get sold at the Obama Center, the tourist cups as an example, right, are that company is based in the neighborhood, right? We fully agree with that, right? But it is no small feat to see the development of a business, by folks who have been most impacted by disinvestment, right? It requires another level of infrastructure in terms of small business development, in terms of, being proactive about the RFPs that get put in place so that, those companies are actually prioritized, right? And we want to see that, right? With the construction coming, the university just built 3, as I mentioned, buildings, a dorm, a conference center, a hotel. Where is their investment in workforce development in the construction trades to get working families, low-income people into the construction trades, right? There's a lot of great programming out there that does that. Where's their investment in that? Right? The United Way has a great program which buys boots and tools for people, because that's one of the barriers. Folks literally can't get these union jobs because they don't have enough to buy boots and a tool. those barriers shouldn't exist when the University of Chicago is building a luxury hotel, right? And so those are questions that need to be asked of them, and all the actors that are working to see the growth that comes from the Obama Center to ensure that it's equitable, need to have an eye towards that, towards ensuring that ex-offenders, right, who are coming back to the neighborhood, see opportunity for themselves, right? So those are the questions that, you know, we are going to continue to ask and fight for, and definitely welcome more conversation around. I'll start to land it there in case,
Okay.
you know, so we have more space for questions.
Alex, I thank you so much. If you could end screen share, thank you. Alex, I want to thank you for two things. One is being so comprehensive in your presentation this morning, and for the history piece. History is the DNA of the present, always. And so you have very carefully and clearly outlined for us how this particular development comes into a neighborhood with a history of discrimination, and that has resulted in the very low median average income that we see today. And I secondly want to thank you for being a voice for that community. There's got to be a voice, and it sounds like you and other coalition partners have been leading with that voice. So I just thank you for being that voice in this issue. I'm going to lead off with a question and then open it up to others. My question is, number one, why does the city of Chicago own so much land in that neighborhood, or maybe throughout the city? And two, related, what's the next step then in converting that publicly owned land, the 52 parcels, converting those parcels into affordable housing? And who is specifically going to oversee that conversion? I guess that's three questions.
Yeah. And I'll try to be brief so that we can have more conversation as well. So I think I have to start backwards because I'm trying to remember. What was the first question? You know,
why does the city of Chicago
the city owned, right,
so much land?
Yeah, I'm not actually completely sure, but I'm pretty sure it has to do with the history I talked about of disinvestment and buildings kind of burning down and lots being left vacant. So folks, you know, owners running off with the insurance money and just leaving land, you know, just leaving it there. And then the city having no choice but to take ownership.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then in terms of the next step,
affordable housing. What's
yeah. So so now that this ordinance has been in place, there are certain guardrails about how that land can be used, which is significant. And the next step is to create a request for proposals, an RFP, where the city would put out and ask folks to come in with proposals to buy that land. And so they're talking about doing a public process starting in March to get voices and input into what's in that RFP, and then they would put out the RFP. For these 52 lots, because there's such an aggressive affordable housing requirement, really the only folks that would likely put in to purchase them and could actually meet those affordability requirements would be nonprofit developers who kind of specialize in that, and in accessing tools like low-income housing tax credits, which are often used for the construction, and then, you know, long-term federal subsidies to actually subsidize operations. And so, you know, we're also concerned about making sure that there are good developers that come in, you know, because there's not all nonprofit developers are equal. You know, our tenant base that we organize with live in a lot of the low-income housing developments, and a lot of our growth and power building has come through efforts to hold their owners accountable to actually make needed repairs and treat them decently and respectfully. So we definitely want to make sure that, you know, respectful owners and managers are there. We also have an eye towards alternative affordable housing models like community land trusts, co-ops. And so we definitely want to, we're trying to have conversations around that and look at opportunities for that as well. But yeah, the money is the big barrier, right? And so folks would have to put in to get the tax credits. If we could get the university to create a fund, for example, which is something that we're asking for, right? Then developers could come in and say, well, I got the tax credits, I got this GAP grant fund from the university's loan program, and I got HUD behind me, and that just makes things a lot easier, right? And so that's what we're pushing.
And who is going to really be in charge of following through and making sure this happens?
So it's the city, the Department of Housing and the Department of Planning kind of together are at least quarterbacking the development of this RFP process. I'm not sure like which department is going to oversee but I suppose through that process we'll learn more. Good.
Quarterbacking, a good word for today. I wanted to, for those of you who got on the call a little late, I wanted to reintroduce my friend and colleague, Jesse Knox. Jesse's pastor of Church of the Good Shepherd United Church of Christ, which I think is just south of 55th, right, Jesse?
At 57th and Prairie.
Oh, okay, just north, sorry. And Jesse is also on the board of directors of Emerald South Economic Development Cooperative, and that's headed by Guion Foreman, next week's guest with us. Questions, comments from the circle today for Alex? Yes, Paul?
I wondered about the 52 lots. Are they kind of dispersed randomly throughout the area? Are they concentrated? Was there any effort to make sure there was, I guess that things were spread out more rather than forcing everyone into a particular area?
Yeah, so the lots haven't been designated so it's 52 of the 208 that the city owns. And so which lot is not set yet. We did put in so that 10 of them would at least allow for density so that we could have, some level of scale in terms of impact, right? Because we don't, if we only do 2 or 3 flats dispersed everywhere, then we end up with much less units. I think a really, viable model that is being looked at is the idea of along 63rd, there being kind of commercial and then mixed income on top of the commercial stuff on 63rd is a way to produce much more affordable units, right? And so that's something that we're kind of hoping for. And so again, 10 lots of the 52 have to be higher density to allow for that kind of thing. But where they are is not set yet, right? It just means that, they could sell 150 of them to for-profit, whoever, but after that, then they have to stop because ordinance is in place that requires them.
And Jean, I saw your hand. And if anyone else has a comment, you can unmute yourself and speak or wave your hand or just put it in the raise your hand using the reactions buttons at the bottom. Jean?
Yeah, I mean, this is like a naive, I was just sort of thinking out of the box of how do you get the financing and wondering if, there are so many media outlets now that are looking to show that they are diverse and marketing to diverse groups. Could you partner with Habitat for Humanity? Could you partner with HGTV or Magnolia Network or one of these home building networks that might want to broaden their appeal to come in and help get this done and focus resources on it? And just an idea.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. And it's something that, there needs to be somebody who that's what they do. And hopefully we can get, somebody that, it's not something that we could do because our focus really is on kind of the organizing, bringing people together. I think, we're very mindful not to become developers because we've seen so many groups throughout history, see opportunities for money and building a patronage army by just becoming developers. And so we are very clear about our mission that we got to stay focused on the organizing. But I think partnering with somebody to look at that, the fact that this is near the Obama Center means that yeah, a lot of those, it will be attractive to folks like you're talking about, right? I mean, this, everybody I think will want to be associated, right, with that. Like you get that extra added prestige by just locating there. So I think it's a great point.
And Nina, and then Paul again. Mm-hmm. Nina?
I wondered about the possibility that evicting people from housing may make job opportunities. And don't you have to balance the increase of job opportunities, which is certainly a big need in the neighborhood?
Can you clarify? I'm not sure I understand.
Well,
what's the job opportunity created through an eviction?
Any of the building of the corridor or of any facilities will produce jobs.
Mm-hmm.
I just wondering how you balance the two possibilities. The
possibility of building and how that has pushing up of the rents and so on. Is that what you're saying?
For something that creates jobs.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think our point is that we can have both. We can have jobs and folks not getting pushed out. I think it's often called development without displacement, right? And the way you do that is by having aggressive, affordable housing policies in place that protect people, right? And I think this ordinance that we talked about is an example of, it's a down payment on a bigger policy, right? But I think had they just said, we're going to develop the Obama Center and we will let the invisible hand of the housing market figure out where people should live, right? That's a recipe for just displacement, right? And destroying a community. And so our point is that there needs to be policies in place that can stop people from being pushed out. So clearly using city land to further affordable housing goals is an example. But I reference other examples like rent control and investment and financing from other institutions as well as ways that you can put in place that policy.
Paul and then Carol.
Yeah, I was wondering if the Obama Center people are providing any money for the affordable housing effort.
So far, no. I'm hopeful that we'll get there. I think they've tried as best they could to stay out of the whole fight. But it definitely had an impact on them, and we knew it didn't. While we weren't, since that public meeting that I mentioned years ago, we never targeted the Obama Center directly, but obviously the center was part of the narrative because that's what was driving up prices. And so they indirectly got pulled in and they were very aware of it. And they've let us know that it bothers them and they want to do something about it. And so they're very pleased that the ordinance was passed and there was an agreement and a compromise. But yeah, no commitments yet. They've mostly talked, the only commitments they've made, they have put some into, as I mentioned, workforce development. So they have been proactive about the construction jobs that they're creating and trying to make sure that folks get into the building trades. The Obama family itself put $1 million towards the programs like the United Way one that I was talking about, and another one called Chicago Women in Trade that are really proactive about quality workforce development initiatives. And they have a public commitments document that came out, we think, in largely response to our organizing. And it did include a commitment to address affordable housing issues, but there was no concrete thing there. So we do intend to open up dialogue with them moving forward to see how they can play a role in all this.
Thanks.
I'm on Carol, and then there's a very good question from Jennifer in the chat. Carol?
Well, I've heard a lot of talk about affordable housing, which is really a critical issue across much of the United States, not only around the Obama Center, but I haven't heard a lot of discussion about how do you restore that to a working class community. You talked a little bit about allowing people in the construction industry, but that's a limited area. How else are you going to really build jobs and job training across the board in this community?
Yeah, I mean, the largest employer on the South Side is the University of Chicago, blocks away, right? And so there's a corridor coming that's going to be developed on 63rd. There's, a bunch of tourist related jobs coming related to the center. So opportunity is not going to be our problem at all. It's really going to be, putting in place investments in infrastructure so that folks who have the most to gain and who need it the most are actually the ones that benefit. And that's really going to be the hard part. And so that's where we have to hold the city accountable, the university, the center, everybody who's going to be, already has programs in place to do that and is planning on ramping them up to go deeper and to work harder, including us. So I mean, we have a restorative justice program that we have that works with our community organization STOP, that focuses on disconnected youth. So you don't get disconnected youth into the trades by just advertising a workshop and a sign-up fair. You have to actually drive them to it. You have to follow up with them. You have to be aware that they're going to stand you up a few times in the process. You're going to have to buy them lunch and talk it over again and get them back interested. And there's a lot, you got to go that extra mile with folks that have such a long history of disinvestment that have been, pushed out of every opportunity, throughout their lives. So
I may suggest one of the things you can really do, maybe you could really do, is put more pressure on the University of Chicago and really take a look, for instance, at the University of Southern California and Los Angeles. They are one of the largest employers of that whole community. They work very, very hard to have a very positive impact, employment impact, and a positive impact on the whole community around them.
Yeah, I mean, and the U of C is that largest employer. There's been a shift, since I was a student, there's been a turn towards engaging the community. I think before the 2000s, they were, openly putting up walls around them. And since then they started to say, no, we want to engage. During the 2000s, it was all talk, I would say. But, since the 2010s, it's become a little more action. We've actually seen a little more movement. But yeah, there's a ton of work to do because, you have to have career ladders in place. You have to invest in building career ladders, right? You have to have those training programs. I fully agree with you. That is stuff that we're really pushing hard. And to date, the university has gotten away with, coming out with their own flashy initiatives, dropping a lot on marketing around it. And that's it, And so there really needs to be some negotiation, some back and forth with community voices that hold them to account. So I agree.
So I'm going to read Jennifer's question, and then Jesse, after that, I'd like to give you a chance if you have any contributions or questions, comments, okay? Jennifer Guy asks, are there other examples of development without displacement that are available from other cities for us to take a look at as a model?
Yeah, I mean, I think there isn't like one that's going to completely line up. It's really like drawing from bits and pieces. The first CBA is the Staples Center in Los Angeles, one that's often looked at as, the classic CBA where they brought in the Staples Center, but they did investment in affordable housing and they did investment in workforce development. There's you can look at cities like Burlington, where they developed around the lakefront, which was like a very high place of interest, a development interest, but put in a lot of affordability. They have one of the largest community land trusts there in Burlington, Vermont, right, where folks have long-term affordability and perpetuity thanks to that. So you know, I think we pull from different kind of models, you know, from around the country to look at some of those best practices. There's a place in California called New Market, where they put a shopping mall up, and the community actually has there's like a community IPO sort of, where community members own shares of the shopping mall, and they're investing in them, putting businesses in there. So I think, you know, you kind of have to look at a lot of these different places, but unfortunately, we don't have a very rational policy of development without displacement. So instead, what we have is little pockets of it.
Thanks. We've got just a couple minutes here. Jesse, do you have any contributions, questions, responses today?
I just wanted to thank Alex for not only his presentation, but the excellent work that he's done over his 15 years of just being an organizer. And he hit all the key points. University of Chicago does not have a history of being trustworthy. That's the bottom line. They're usually focused on themselves, and if they're not held accountable, then it creates the situations that we have. I just want to add two things to Alex's presentation, that one of the levers that you also have now, the University of Chicago has said that they're trying to change their narrative. And I think that you can begin to hold them accountable. They formed 4 different working committees that looks at workforce, entrepreneurship, housing, and commercial development. And I think that's one of the levers that you can start to focus on to make sure that they say whatever they're going to do, that they're going to do it. And the second point is this is an opportunity for these diverse communities, Woodlawn, Washington Park, and South Shore, to be treated as one community. And I think that's where we're going to get the biggest bang for our buck, so that all the issues that you've identified for the employment opportunities, the displacement of families, and making sure that you prepare an educated and competitive workforce going forward. You have to treat it as one campus, and then use the strengths of each one to address those issues that have been ignored, that Alex clearly laid out historically. And one of my roles in terms of serving, I'm also an alum of the University of Chicago, and I also served on Southeast Chicago Commission. I'm staying on these boards to see if they're going to hold true to the things that they advocate.
So much, Pastor Knox, and for all you do as well. Really appreciate it.
Appreciate you.
Jesse, thank you for those comments, and also for your being with us today. I'm going to be concluding us here soon. There is a very good question, Alex. I'm going to maybe offline get your response to, so I can pass it along next week. The question was, does the University of Chicago have a School of Social Work? And if so, would that be a group of professors and students and grad students who would be advocates for this mission, for your mission? I don't know if you can maybe give a very quick response to that.
Yeah, yes and yes.
Okay.
I actually like to share, they've actually worked, we've had a member of our congregation that is an alum of the University of Chicago School of Social Work. Name is Elizabeth Butler. They have a special award earmarked for her. And we've had some great programs. We had a program that was called this Hoop Scholars, where the SSA students got kids from the neighborhood, make sure that they participated in basketball, but they had to attend class, they had to have tutors, and it was an excellent collaborative. And we used to have a clinic where the medical students would work out of the Church of the Good Shepherd to 2 days out of the week to make sure that the families had some kind of health care. So there's a history of those collaborations.
Okay, good. Alex, do you have anything like within just a few seconds you can answer that question? That was a good question from Fleury Lynn, by the way. Thanks.
No, just, yeah, also, you know, they've been allies and participants in our work throughout STOP's history.
Good. All right. Well, Alex, thank you again. Alex Goldenberg, the Executive Director of Southside Together Organizing for Power, STOP.